On to more important matters. Australia electing its first Labour government in almost a decade. And Anthony Albanese, remember that name? He's their new Prime Minister, ousting Scott Morrison's coalition.
Well, we can speak now to Nigel Nelson, who is the political editor of the Sunday Mirror. He joins us now. Good morning to you, Nigel. Thank you so much for joining us on your Sunday morning. A seismic shift to the left in Australia. What do you think has caused this?
Well, I think it's climate change. I mean, that's been the big issue of the election. We'll know in a few days whether Anthony Albanese can actually govern on his own or will have to go into coalition. And if he ends up in a coalition, it'll be with the Teals, who are independent. Now, they get their name from the fact that they're sort of midway between Conservative blue and environmental green. And then there's also the Green Party, who look like they've already picked up 3 seats. So at the moment, he's trying to form a majority. He needs 76 in the House of Representatives, and then he's off and running. But climate change has really been the big thing of this election, that Australia has a very difficult kind of path to tread. On the one hand, that they've had 3 years of floods and bushfires, so it's one of the countries that's been most affected by climate change. On the other, they are one of the world's biggest exporter of fossil fuels. So that the new Prime Minister won't want to actually damage the economy by not producing coal, not opening new coal mines. Equally, he's got to do something pretty radical to combat climate change that's been wrecking the country.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? What do you make of those people who say that this is a reaction to the extremely tight lockdown policy that was enacted by Scott Morrison's government?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is that Australia's situation is a bit different from the way that things happened in Britain. Even though they had really quite severe lockdowns, their economy has grown by 4.5% during the pandemic. So from an economic point of view, they've done quite well. The issue, obviously, with climate change doesn't really impact on COVID. So I don't think that particular thing is an issue. It is really the idea that Australia has been so ravaged by the results of climate change. This has become a kind of wake-up call to do something about it.
And it doesn't seem like there's going to be much change in terms of relations between Australia and the UK either, given Anthony Albanese is a fan of... he's not a fan, but he still supports the policy of pushbacks, of processing offshore when it comes to immigration, still in charge, it's still in favour of the security deal that the UK has signed with Australia.
Yes, that's right. So the AUKUS deal to build nuclear submarines in Australia to deal with China, that will go ahead. The trade deal, the free trade deal with Britain, worth about £10 billion, that was signed in December. That'll go ahead. There's no change there. One of the interesting things, I think, for number 10, though, is that Anthony Albanese is a great mate of Jeremy Corbyn's, that they met when he was over earlier on this year. So number 10 won't like that. There's also, if you look at his past, he's a Republican who was quite keen on getting rid of the Queen as Australia's head of state. However, there was none of that in the election manifesto. And my suspicion is that it's one of those issues that will be parked. He's got more important things to deal with in the meantime.
This result suggests for Britain, we're just having a newspaper review there. One of our guests was talking about the cost of living crisis becoming the biggest election issue. She was saying that perhaps we could see a similar thing happen at the next general election where there's a swing here from right to left. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. That's what I mean about things are actually a bit different from Australia to Britain. I mean, certainly by far the biggest issue in this country is cost of living crisis. So even clearing the NHS backlog or dealing with crime, we have a poll in our paper this morning which shows that they are much lower down the list, and 6 in 10 people say, right, cost of living will determine how they're going to vote next time round. And at the moment, the Conservatives really haven't got to grips with what's going on here. And we see the row that is going on now between Rishi Sunak and the Prime Minister about whether or not, for instance, you impose a windfall tax on the oil giants. So cost of living is very much the big thing here. And of course, we're also, we haven't got the kind of growth that Australia has had. So our economy could pitch into recession. So as I say, that the issues are different. And I think that when it comes to Britain, it is very much down to the economy.
Really good to have your thoughts this morning, Nigel. Thank you so much for joining us. Nigel Nelson there, political editor at the Sunday Mirror. And Nigel was touching there on the Australian economy. It's currently growing at 4% a year, 4%, whereas our economy forecast to contract next year before then slightly growing the year after. So very different economies and difficult, very different situation, really. But really interesting what Nigel had to say there.